Story 1. This is like asking what is the worst cancer. They are all terrible. All addictions have the ability to destroy lives, create relationship issues with others, and cause trust issues between loved ones. Story 2. I have been working with people struggling with addiction for 20 years. In my experience, nothing is worse than opiates, heroin, and fentanyl specifically. The big issue for me is when an individual gains sobriety of 6 months or more and then relapses. Generally, they have lost all their tolerance, and when they relapse, they return to the amount they used at the height of their addiction. This is a recipe for a deadly overdose. Of all the people I have worked with who have passed away from a relapse, the vast majority have been due to an opiate. Story 3. I read a story about a man who stayed awake for 5 days using methamphetamine and ended up talking to an old friend for hours. He eventually passed out and realized his friend had been dead for years. That sounds very distressing. Do not use drugs, everyone. Story 4. Dopamine addiction is arguably the root cause of all addictions. Everyone is susceptible to it, but few actually recognize it. This addiction can manifest in many ways, from seemingly harmless trans fats and sugar to injecting hard drugs. Story 5. Gambling is a significant issue. Methamphetamine users eventually run out of drugs, but gamblers can bet money they do not even have. Story 6. Alright, I'll come clean. As a marijuana user, I must admit I have a terrible addiction to video games. Bored? Games. Tired? Games. Work to do? Games. Hold my third child? Games. Okay, maybe not the last one. Story 7. Watching my father essentially die in front of me from methamphetamine addiction was very difficult. It is like my father is dead, but his body is still there. He is now just a shell of the man I knew and loved. Story 8. I am trying to stop using a product called 7-0. You can buy this product from a vapor shop, and I do not wish this on my worst enemies. Story 9. I'm going to say something many people won't like. My addiction to my phone ruined my life more than the heroin I used over 15 years ago. I used heroin chronically for 3 years, putting myself and others in harm's way and becoming very sick. When I eventually got well, food and my phone took its place. I gained 90 kilograms in 2 years and managed to stay financially afloat for about 3 years, but then everything declined. The ability to scroll, read, and consume content endlessly became a massive issue, as did playing games. I can't fully explain what it did to my brain because I know it sounds unbelievable. Genuinely, when I reached rock bottom with the drugs, there was a clear way out. It was not easy. I felt like I was dying, but there is almost no help for someone addicted to a screen. Story 10. I think pornography is a difficult addiction to overcome that damages your physical and mental health, especially if you are a lonely person. Story 11. Gambling can ruin your life quicker than almost any drug, assuming you do not take a lethal dose. People who were well off and seem to have everything have run themselves into huge debt in a short time due to gambling addictions. It is truly shocking how quickly a gambling addiction can destroy your life. Story 12. I would argue power. Most other addictions are personal or at least only affect those you know and love. An addiction to power can hurt many more people. Story 13. I am impressed that pornography and masturbation are not higher on the list. That says a lot about things, unfortunately. Story 14. Outrage. People do not talk about it, but many of us are addicted to reading things that make us angry. It can cause our mental health to suffer if all we read in the news is negativity and bad things happening in the world. Story 15. Lifestyle addiction is often overlooked. As you grow up, you develop and fall into comfortable habits such as falling asleep with the television on. A few months later, you may find you cannot sleep without background noise. It is so subconscious that you do not notice you are addicted to at least 20 different things. Story 16. Afrin nasal spray is difficult to quit because you may experience breathing difficulties for months afterward. Story 17. Went down a ways and did not see an easy answer here. Sex addiction. Imagine walking out of your home and being triggered by anyone you see. Having intrusive sexual thoughts about almost everyone you ever lay eyes on, especially if you are married or in a committed relationship. Sex addiction is a difficult issue and it ruins people's lives. It is not all fun and joy as some want to believe. It is a nightmare. Story 18. It is alcohol. It is socially acceptable, but once you become addicted, it can actually be deadly when you stop. It is the easiest and most accessible substance to obtain, but recovery takes time. Story 19. I have been addicted to alcohol, methamphetamine, oxycodone, gamma hydroxybutyrate, and cocaine. The hardest thing to quit for me was cigarettes. Story 20. Fame. People have spent their lives chasing the high it gives. They have killed for it or sacrificed their own lives to become famous. Story 21. I was helping a coworker who lost his license and was spending weekends in jail. He is a methamphetamine user. He told me he takes methadone and sells it to his friends. Before going into jail, he would take his methadone pill, and once inside, he would vomit it into a bag and share it with others in jail. Story 22. A therapist once told me that eating disorders are the hardest to cure, so anything related to food addiction might be worse than drug addiction. This is probably because you have to eat. Story 23. Alcohol is the most widely accepted and easily accessible substance. Steve-O even said it was the worst addiction because many people slowly let their lives fade away. Story 24. Addiction to drama will not only crush you but also the people around you in ways that terrify you to your core. Story 25. Power and superiority over other people. Individuals with substance addictions usually get help because they can see that it is hurting them and their loved ones. People with power and superiority addictions do not have the capability to realize that they even have that addiction in the first place, so they never work on it. Story 26. Alcohol. There are substances that are certainly more destructive, but alcohol is easily available, accepted, and ingrained in society. The culture of drinking to get intoxicated is a big part of the issue. Even the withdrawal symptoms can be fatal. I worked at a liquor store for a few years and saw many lives destroyed by alcohol. I was naive at first and thought it would be a cool job, but I quickly felt like a merchant of death. Eventually, I could not do it anymore. Story 27. Heroin, which is now 90% fentanyl, is a serious problem. Prison, robbery, and destroying lives are just some of the consequences. However, there is hope if you can stay clean for years. There are living examples of recovery and success. Story 28. I'm speaking from the perspective of a rehabilitation worker, so I have a strong bias toward alcohol. Detoxing from any substance causes people to suffer and reach lows they never imagined possible. But alcohol is a real nightmare. Withdrawals can be fatal, they are painful, and the things the body goes through are intense. People who are severe alcoholics come in malnourished, can flip from enraged to depressed to hopeful at the drop of a pin, and can be so confused they have no clue how they even got there. As the effects wear off, new struggles emerge. I had one patient who came in so drunk he didn't know where he was. He was just below the limit where we would have to send him to a hospital for continuous observation, and after nearly 24 hours, he wasn't improving mentally. We ran a second urine drug screen just in case, and his urine was black. We called for an ambulance while I stayed and tried to talk him through what was happening. His last memory was being at a party, and he thought that was where he was. He thought he was at a work party and had a bit too much to drink. That was a few days prior, according to his patient history. He did not come back from the hospital. I've seen people return from methamphetamine, fentanyl, and crack cocaine addictions. Any one of those substances can be devastating. However, I have had a vast majority of patients end up clean after a slip-up or two, or on their first time through the program, 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and still clean. Half of my patients who come in for alcohol addiction will see my friendly face and those gray walls multiple times. Drinking is promoted in commercials, shown in daytime television and movies. There are buildings specifically designed around the intention of drinking. People make light of teenagers attempting to drink. It is part of countless cultures and societies. So, when people start overdoing it, it is usually not a warning sign at first. No one notices it has gone too far until someone has spent nearly a decade getting intoxicated almost every day. Most people in rehabilitation for alcohol addiction are there because it has reached the point that their jobs started to notice and recommended rehab, or their family gave them the classic ultimatum, get help or we leave. My uncle did not go to rehabilitation until his boss caught him driving the company truck while he was intoxicated. Even then, he thought it was stupid that he, a grown man, couldn't drink when he wanted. He thought he was able to control it and only drink when he was not working, as if that were the biggest problem. His family had already left him by this point because of the drinking. First, it was the tequila's fault, so he switched to gin. Then, it was their fault for trying to manipulate and control him. He finally got sober when his liver was on the verge of shutting down and he nearly died. He lost his career, something he was proud of and talked about as often as he could. He lost his family and love. He lost the respect of those closest to him. And finally, after nearly losing his life, he took it seriously and cleaned up. He is an anomaly among severe alcoholics since usually the final step is death and the hope that an afterlife free of addiction exists. Story 29. Trigger warning. Self-harm. There was one girl who was addicted to self-harm. It was the worst I have ever seen. Every inch from head to toe was covered in scars. When she took it too far, she inflicted serious life-threatening lacerations. Staples or stitches were needed every time she cut that deep. The cuts were long, about 6 or more inches. She appeared on Dr. Phil. Her poor mother. Story 30. Detoxing from a severe alcohol addiction was the hardest thing I have ever done. 15 years later, it still haunts me. I will never drink again. Story 31. Gambling can ultimately lead to self-harm. Although gambling may drive you to consider taking your own life, it is important to seek help and support. Story 32. If you have an eating disorder that causes a food addiction, it is the worst because you can quit any recreational drug and never have to even look at it again, but food is everywhere. You are going to have to struggle with that constantly. It is also really hard to stop overeating physically because, like opiates or other substances, your body gets habituated to it and becomes distressed when you stop. Story 33. The worst is simple. How much has a factor ruined or affected your life to the point where you do not see a path forward? This relates to anything: drugs, alcohol, love, gambling, food, mental health issues, relationships, name it. The worst is reflected in the outcome of reality, which is different for everyone. Getting help depends on numerous factors, making it hard, complex, and complicated once anyone has entered any difficult situation. It depends on how far they have gone and the amount of help and resources they have to get out when the world keeps going without regard for anyone else's well-being. Story 34. Food. It will kill you very slowly. It will make the rest of the world hate and revile you. It will make people mock and torment you until you want to die. It will make doctors dismiss you. And you literally cannot ever stop eating. You cannot not eat food. Imagine an alcoholic who has to keep drinking, but only a little in order to overcome his addiction. It's impossible. Welcome to food addiction and eating disorders. Story 35. Opioids. My sister told me before she overdosed and died that it felt like her bones were shattering. You don't understand how painful it is. I will never forget it. Story 36. I would say gambling because, unlike drugs or alcohol where you reach a limit and may pass out or die, with gambling there is no limit to the amount of damage you can cause, usually to others such as family members or workplaces if theft or fraud occurs. Story 37. Methamphetamine or alcohol. I am an addictions counselor, and these tend to be the worst. Fentanyl is also very dangerous. Story 38. Probably like eating children while cutting down the rainforest. If you are addicted to that, I do not know if we can be friends. Story 39. Sugar addiction. I feel like I need it lately, whether it is in pastries, cookies, sugared milk, sweetened tea, or anything else. I even get a headache and become annoyed when I do not have it. Story 40. Probably glue. I do not know how addictive it is, but I have 2 relatives who completely lost their minds from allegedly sniffing glue. Story 41. Bulimia is a severe eating disorder. I am grateful that I recovered and will never look back. Alcoholism has controlled my life for nearly a decade. I am definitely biased, though. Story 42. Food is the correct answer. Alcohol is a close runner-up since it can affect every body system in your body. Story 43. I suppose it really comes down to the person who has the addiction. Different people with different resources, living environments, and support networks can experience different effects depending on the addiction. In general, are we talking about worse effects on health, finances, or relationships? For example, fentanyl addiction can be severe, but what if the person has a support group? How about gambling? Maybe they have a lot of money. Pornography? They might live alone. All of these addictions can lead to death, financial ruin, suicide, or ended relationships, and, depending on the person, could be considered worse than any other addiction. Story 44. They are all terrible and affect your life in various ways. I have my own addictions, but I have always thought that gambling would be a terrible addiction to have. Story 45. The addiction of not feeling pain. Whether the pain is being masked by excessive work, food, procrastination, cigarettes, alcohol, promiscuity, or drugs. Not feeling pain is the worst addiction. Anything done to mask pain is the worst path you can take. Story 46. Opioids have a lasting hold on me, and all I can do is keep fighting against them. I have been clean for 5 years. Overall, I would say food has a strong hold too. You have to have food to survive, unlike other substances. Story 47. Alcohol. I lost my best friend's brother to it. It made me stop for maybe a week before the funeral. Then I slowly went from a shot a day to making sure I had a couple of shots every hour. I could function, got promotions at work, and my family and love life were going well. I just played up the party guy role, and my family thought, yeah, bad, but gets things done. Next thing I know, a little over a year later, I was in the hospital in and out of consciousness. I nearly died over something I could just legally get, and rarely ever hear anything bad about because it was legal and everyone drinks. It was easy to access, provided, and encouraged on a large scale. It nearly killed me, and I thought I was just fine. I just celebrated my 30th birthday sober and am as healthy as I could be. Beyond lucky. Something so accessible and accepted, but truly one of the most dangerous without people noticing. I can't tell people enough. If you can enjoy it and control yourself, by all means do it, but please, please, please be careful and responsible. Story 48. Probably opiates. With opiates, it is a very slippery slope. You can get hooked extremely quickly, and the addiction also progresses very quickly. 1 minute you are taking prescription oxycodone, then your prescription runs out. Now you are buying off the street, but they are getting too expensive, so you buy a bag of heroin and become an intravenous user. That is not even the end. You realize you are not doing heroin, it is really fentanyl or, depending on the location, a good possibility of it being xylazine. Suddenly, you become the worst imaginable version of yourself and will do anything for a bag. Story 49. For me, it was alcohol. Every other drug I was able to decide one day that was enough. But alcohol, goddamn, does it have a grip on you? Story 50. The one that affects many people involves the relentless pursuit and acquisition of money, property, and material possessions, which is legitimized by capitalism. It is known as greed. We live in a sick, twisted society where we vilify addiction to alcohol or drugs but look up to people who are addicted to money. We enable such people while telling poor people that they are asking too much. If that is not hypocrisy, then I do not know what is. Story 51. Gambling is the answer currently. It is unchecked. It is unhinged. It is being exploited by every single company. When was the last time you heard about someone harming themselves due to a gambling debt in the headlines? It has been a long time, hasn't it? Makes you wonder why. Because I guarantee you it happens a lot more than you think. But it is almost as if that headline would be bad for business. Story 52. As a recovering gambling addict, I must say this. I am 2 years clean, thank God. But in reality, it is no different than any other addiction you can have. With gambling, there are no track marks or physical signs, but you feel completely like the drug addicts portrayed on television. That is why I feel it is the scariest, but not the worst. Sure, you can overdose on different drugs and perish, which makes those addictions seem worse. But what if you lose a $500,000 house? What if your wife leaves with the kids? What happens when your family abandons you? What happens when you try to sell your $65,000 car with 4,000 miles on it for only $5,000 because you have to gamble? That is a death that occurs while you are still in your physical body. Being dead while walking the earth is unimaginable to some. I empathize with every addict, no matter the addiction, but living the life of a gambling addict makes wanting to actually die a strong possibility every single day. Whatever you may be recovering from, there are communities that will help guide you through. Please seek help. Story 53. Cigarettes. I have been on a break from smoking for 7 years, but all it will take for me to return to a pack-a-day habit is a tragedy or a triumph. It does not matter which. It is especially sad and ironic because I used to write messages inside my dad's cigarette packs, telling him how bad smoking was and that he should quit. Story 54. Crack is very harmful. Fentanyl can cause death, but crack will not kill you. Instead, it will leave you broke, scared, and involved in trouble. Story 55. Nicotine. I know people might think this is dramatic, but genuinely, starting vaping was the worst mistake of my life. Story 56. Addicted to toxic relationships seems to be a significant problem. I myself will see a red flag while walking, and every time, my brain goes, "Ooh, shiny. Can I get your number?" Story 57. Sewing, knitting, any sort of hobby where you can accumulate supplies. It is more expensive than medications. Medications would make more sense. Instead, I am broke with a closet full of yarn. Story 58. Never have I done hard drugs, but the handful of times I have been in trouble with the law, it was because I was intoxicated. Also, nearly every bad decision I have made in life has been when I was drinking. Story 59. Anger. Having borderline personality disorder makes it hard to let go of. As an alcoholic in recovery, I spent too much time being angry and liking it. It is exhausting, but I could not stop. Story 60. When I was in rehabilitation for alcohol, one of the counselors said that gambling can be the hardest to overcome for many people. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.